Blood trickled across the dusty street of Chisum Ranch, New Mexico territory, as Katherine Everly lay motionless under the harsh afternoon sun. Her once pristine blue dress now torn and soiled, her face barely recognizable beneath the bruises that had been ruthlessly inflicted upon her. Zachary Orwell pulled his chestnut stallion to an abrupt halt at the edge of town, his keen eyes narrowing at the crumpled form in the distance. The year was 1879, and lawlessness still had a firm grip on this remote corner of the territory. He'd seen death and suffering before far too much for his 30 years, but something about the abandoned woman in the street made his blood run cold. "Whoa there, Maverick," he murmured to his horse, dismounting with fluid grace that belied his 6'2" frame. His spurs clinked against the hard-packed dirt as he approached, one hand instinctively resting on the Colt revolver at his hip. It wasn't unusual to find victims of violence in these parts, but to leave a woman in such a state in the middle of the day spoke of a particular brand of cruelty. Zachary knelt beside the woman, his weathered hat casting a shadow over her battered face. She was breathing, but just barely. Her honey-blonde hair was matted with blood, and dark bruises bloomed across her delicate features. She couldn't have been more than 25. His jaw clenched as he took in the scene, anger building in his chest at whoever had done this to her. "Miss," he called softly, receiving no response. "Miss, can you hear me?" The few townsfolk who were on the street kept their distance, watching with wary eyes. Some looked away, ashamed or frightened. Others simply stared as if witnessing a spectacle. No one moved to help. "Is anyone going to tell me what happened here?" Zachary called out, his voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence. No one answered. A saloon door swung shut. A woman hurried her child inside a nearby store. With a muttered curse, Zachary gently slid his arms beneath the unconscious woman. She was lighter than he expected, her body limp as he lifted her against his chest. He could feel her shallow breathing, the faint flutter of her heartbeat. She needed help, and quickly. "Someone fetch the doctor," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. An older man finally broke from the crowd, nodding once before hurrying down the street. Zachary carried the woman toward the town's small hotel, the only place he could think to take her. Her head lolled against his shoulder, a soft moan escaping her cracked lips. It was the only indication that she still clung to life. The hotel keeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Holloway, gasped when Zachary kicked open the door, the unconscious woman cradled in his arms. "Good heavens!" she exclaimed, clutching her throat. "What's happened?" "I found her in the street," Zachary explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She's been beaten badly. I need a room for her, and hot water. The doctor's coming." Mrs. Holloway's shocked expression quickly transformed into one of efficiency. She was no stranger to violence in Chisum Ranch, and her motherly instincts took over as she led Zachary up the narrow stairs to a small, clean room at the end of the hall. "Put her here," she instructed, pulling back the quilt on the bed. "I'll fetch water and clean linens." Zachary laid the woman down as gently as possible, disturbed by how fragile she felt beneath his calloused hands. Her face, even through the bruising and blood, held a beauty that tugged at something deep within him. Who was she? What had she done to deserve such treatment? Or had she done nothing at all, simply found herself in the wrong place at the wrong time, as so many did in these lawless territories? As Mrs. Holloway bustled back into the room with a basin of steaming water and clean cloths, Zachary stepped back, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the situation. "I'll wait outside for the doctor," he said, his voice gruff with emotion he couldn't quite identify. "No, you stay," Mrs. Holloway countered firmly. "I'll need help if she wakes and panics. Besides, you found her. She's your responsibility now. Zachary wanted to argue that the woman wasn't his responsibility at all. He was just passing through, had only stopped in Chisum Ranch to resupply before continuing north to Colorado. But the words died in his throat as he looked again at the beaten woman. Something about her called to him, demanded his protection in a way he couldn't explain. He nodded once and took a seat in the small wooden chair by the window, his hat in his hands, watching as Mrs. Holloway began the delicate task of cleaning the blood from the woman's face. Doctor Franklin arrived 15 minutes later, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a grim mouth. He examined the woman thoroughly, his practiced hands gentle but efficient. Multiple contusions, possible fracture of the cheekbone, 2 broken ribs, he listed clinically. She suffered a severe blow to the head. That's what concerns me most. We won't know the extent of the damage until she wakes, if she wakes. Zachary's hands tightened around his hat. Will she survive? The doctor glanced at him, noting the intensity in the cowboy's blue eyes. Hard to say. The next 24 hours will be critical. She needs constant attention. Cold compresses for the swelling, laudanum for the pain when she wakes. I'll stay with her, Mrs. Holloway offered, but Zachary shook his head. I'll take the first watch, he said quietly. You have a hotel to run. I can send for you if there's any change. The doctor and Mrs. Holloway exchanged a look that Zachary pretended not to notice. It wasn't common for a man, especially a stranger, to volunteer to care for an injured woman. But there was something honorable in Zachary's bearing that seemed to reassure them. Very well, Dr. Franklin finally agreed. Keep her still if she wakes. No excitement. I'll check back this evening. He left a small brown bottle of laudanum on the bedside table before departing. Mrs. Holloway lingered a moment longer. There's something you should know, Mr. Orwell. That woman, I believe she's Katherine Everly. Zachary frowned. The name meant nothing to him. She arrived in town just yesterday on the eastbound stage, caused quite a stir. She was asking questions about Jonathan Blackwell. Zachary's expression darkened at the name. Blackwell was well known throughout the territory, a wealthy cattle baron with political connections and a reputation for ruthlessness. Few dared to cross him openly. What kind of questions, Mrs. Holloway lowered her voice. She claimed to be his wife's sister, come to find her. Said Elizabeth, that's Blackwell's wife, stopped writing letters 6 months ago. The girl seemed desperate. The pieces began to fall into place. Zachary had heard rumors about Blackwell's young wife, how she was rarely seen in town, how the servants at their ranch house outside Chisum Ranch were tight-lipped and fearful. You think Blackwell's men did this? Mrs. Holloway wrung her hands. I'm not saying anything of the sort. But in this town, Mr. Orwell, it's wise to be careful about whose business you involve yourself in. With that warning, she left Zachary alone with the unconscious woman Katherine Everly, who had been foolish enough to ask questions about one of the most dangerous men in the New Mexico territory. Zachary moved his chair closer to the bed, studying Katherine's face as the afternoon light slanted through the window. Even through the swelling and bruises, he could see she was beautiful, high cheekbones, a delicate nose, full lips now split and crusted with dried blood. Her honey blonde hair spilled across the pillow in tangled waves. He dipped a cloth in the basin of cool water Mrs. Holloway had left and gently placed it on Katherine's forehead, careful not to press against her injuries. She didn't stir. What kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into, Katherine Everly? He murmured, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Zachary hadn't planned on staying in Chisum Ranch for more than a night. He was a drifter by nature, had been ever since the war ended. 14 years of wandering, taking odd jobs, ranch work mostly, but occasionally hiring out his gun when necessity demanded it. He'd built a reputation as a man who could be counted on in a fight, but he preferred to avoid trouble when possible. Yet something told him that by carrying Katherine Everly out of that street, he'd stepped directly into the kind of trouble he usually rode miles to avoid. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Zachary maintained his vigil. He bathed Katherine's face with cool water, carefully applied the salve Dr. Franklin had left for her cuts, and watched the steady rise and fall of her chest beneath the quilt. Once, she moaned softly and turned her head, giving him a moment of hope, but she didn't wake. Mrs. Holloway brought him dinner, a plate of beef stew and cornbread, which he ate without tasting while seated in the chair beside Katherine's bed. Outside, the sun set in a blaze of orange and crimson, casting long shadows across the small room. It was nearing midnight when Katherine finally stirred. Zachary had dozed off in his chair, his long legs stretched out before him, his hat pulled low over his eyes. A soft whimper brought him instantly alert. Katherine's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and filled with pain. She tried to sit up and immediately gasped, one hand flying to her ribs. "Easy now," Zachary said softly, moving to her side. "You're hurt. Best lie still." Katherine's gaze darted wildly around the room before settling on his face. Fear flashed in her eyes, a deep, emerald green that startled him with their intensity despite the pain clouding them. "Who?" she began, her voice a rasp. She winced and tried again. "Who are you? Where am I?" "Name's Zachary Orwell. You're at the Chisum Ranch Hotel. I found you in the street earlier today. You'd been hurt." Memory flooded back into her eyes, followed quickly by terror. She tried again to rise, panic giving her strength. "I need to leave. Now. Please, you don't understand." Zachary gently but firmly pressed her back against the pillows. "You're not going anywhere in your condition, Miss Everly. Doctor's orders." She froze. "You know my name, Mrs. Holloway recognized you. Said you came to town yesterday, asking questions about Jonathan Blackwell and his wife." Katherine's face paled beneath the bruises. "You can't tell anyone I'm here," she whispered urgently. "The men who did this, they'll come back. They said they would. Blackwell's men." She nodded, then winced at the movement. "Two of them. They caught me at the edge of town when I was walking back from asking questions at the general store. They said Mr. Blackwell doesn't appreciate people prying into his personal affairs." Her voice broke. "They told me to leave town and never come back, or next time they'd kill me." Zachary's jaw tightened. "Did you recognize them? Could you identify them?" One was tall with a scar across his cheek. The other was shorter with a red beard. They were wearing pistols with ivory handles. "Dixon and Harlow," Zachary muttered, "Blackwell's known enforcers." "Miss Everly." "Katherine," she interrupted. "Please call me Katherine." "Katherine, then. You need to understand something about Chisum Ranch. Blackwell owns half the businesses in town, including the sheriff. If his men are after you, there's no official help coming." "I know," she whispered. "But I can't leave. Not yet. Elizabeth is my sister. Our parents are dead. She's all the family I have left. Her letters were always so regular, and then they just stopped. Her last one seemed strange, almost as if she was afraid. I have to find her." Zachary ran a hand through his dark hair, sighing heavily. "First things first, you need to heal. Then we can figure out what to do about your sister." Katherine's eyes widened. "Mr. Orwell, I couldn't possibly ask you to involve yourself in my troubles." "I'm already involved," he replied simply. "And it's Zachary. Now the doctor left this laudanum for your pain. You should take some and rest." Katherine looked as if she wanted to argue further, but the pain seemed to overwhelm her resolve. She allowed Zachary to help her take the medicine, grimacing at the bitter taste. As he eased her back against the pillows, her fingers caught his wrist. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice already growing drowsy from the laudanum. "You don't even know me." Zachary looked down at her hand on his wrist, small, delicate, but with a strength that surprised him. It was a good question, one he wasn't entirely sure he could answer. "Let's just say I've got a problem with men who beat women and leave them for dead in the street," he replied finally. Catherine's eyes were already closing, the laudanum taking effect. "Thank you," she murmured, her words slurring slightly, "for finding me." "Get some rest," Zachary said softly, but she was already asleep. He returned to his chair by the window, staring out at the quiet street below. What was he getting himself into? He'd planned to be long gone from Chisum Ranch by now, headed north to that ranch job waiting in Colorado. Instead, he was sitting watch over a woman who'd managed to anger the most dangerous man in the territory. Zachary had his own reasons for avoiding Jonathan Blackwell. 3 years ago, he'd worked briefly at one of Blackwell's ranches before witnessing the cattle baron's brutality firsthand. Zachary had stepped in when Blackwell was beating a young ranch hand for a minor mistake. The confrontation had ended with Zachary knocking Blackwell to the ground in front of his men. Humiliation the powerful man wouldn't have forgotten. Zachary had left the territory immediately afterward, only returning now because he'd heard Blackwell was away in Santa Fe on business. He'd planned to pass through quickly, but now. He looked back at Katherine, her face peaceful in sleep despite the bruises. If Blackwell's men had done this to her just for asking questions, what might they have done might still be doing to her sister. Dawn was breaking when Dr. Franklin returned to check on his patient. Katherine had slept through the night, stirring occasionally but never fully waking. Zachary, despite his intention to keep watch, had dozed off in his chair sometime in the early morning hours. The doctor's arrival roused him. He stood stiffly, stretching his long limbs as Dr. Franklin examined Katherine. "The swelling has gone down some," the doctor noted approvingly. "But those ribs will take weeks to heal properly, and I'm still concerned about the head injury." "She woke briefly last night," Zachary informed him, "seemed lucid, remembered what happened to her." Dr. Franklin nodded, relief evident in his expression. "That's a good sign. She's young and strong. With proper care, she should recover." As if on cue, Katherine's eyes fluttered open. She seemed momentarily confused before recognition dawned. "Dr. Franklin," she said weakly, "thank you for attending to me." "Just doing my job, Miss Everly," the doctor replied kindly. "How's the pain this morning?" "Considerable," she admitted. "But I'll manage." The doctor administered another dose of laudanum, smaller than the night before, and gave Zachary instructions for Katherine's care before departing. Mrs. Holloway appeared shortly afterward with a tray of breakfast oatmeal for Katherine, eggs and bacon for Zachary. "I've arranged for a girl to come sit with Miss Everly," Mrs. Holloway told Zachary. "You must be exhausted, and I'm sure you have your own affairs to attend to." Before Zachary could respond, Katherine spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been the previous night. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway, but that won't be necessary. Mr. Orwell has kindly agreed to help me with a personal matter. If he's willing to continue assisting me, I'd prefer he stay." Zachary raised an eyebrow at Katherine, who met his gaze steadily despite her battered condition. There was a silent plea in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. "I'm happy to stay," he said, turning to Mrs. Holloway. "Though I'll need to see to my horse and fetch my gear from the livery." Mrs. Holloway looked between them, clearly curious but too polite to pry. "As you wish. I'll bring up more food and fresh water later." When she had gone, Zachary turned to Katherine. "You seem to have made plans for me." A flush rose in her cheeks, visible even beneath the bruising. "I'm sorry." "That was presumptuous. You've already done so much, and I have no right to ask for more. But the truth is, I'm afraid. And you're the only person in this town who's shown me any kindness." Zachary sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I meant what I said last night. I'm already involved. But you should know, Katherine, I have my own history with Blackwell. Not a good one. If I help you, it might make things worse." "What happened between you?" He hesitated, then gave her the abbreviated version of his confrontation with Blackwell 3 years prior. Katherine listened intently, her green eyes widening. "You stood up to him," she said when he'd finished. "Not many would have the courage." "Some would call it foolishness, not courage," Zachary replied wryly. "But I've never been good at standing by when I see injustice." Katherine's expression sobered. "My sister Elizabeth met Jonathan Blackwell in St. Louis 5 years ago. She was just 19. He was charming, wealthy, promised her a life of adventure in the West. Our parents had recently died, leaving us with little money. The marriage seemed like a blessing." She paused, wincing as she shifted position in the bed. Zachary moved forward to help her sit more comfortably, propping pillows behind her back. "For the first year, her letters were full of excitement," Katherine continued. "She loved the territory, loved being a cattle baron's wife. But then the tone changed. She wrote less frequently. When she did write, she seemed guarded. 6 months ago, the letters stopped entirely." "Did you write to the local authorities?" Katherine's laugh was bitter. "I tried. My letters went unanswered. Finally, I scraped together enough money for the stage fare. I had to know if she was all right. And now Blackwell's men have made it clear you're not welcome to investigate." "Yes." Her hands twisted in the bedsheet. "But I can't leave, Zachary. Not until I know what's happened to Elizabeth." Zachary moved to the window, looking out at the dusty street below. His instincts told him to walk away. This wasn't his fight. He had responsibilities waiting in Colorado, a job that would give him stability for the first time in years. But when he turned back and saw Katherine watching him, her face bruised but her eyes determined, he knew he couldn't leave her to face Blackwell alone. "Blackwell's ranch is about 10 miles outside town," he said finally. "If your sister is there, that's where we'll find answers. But first, you need to heal enough to travel, and we need a plan." Relief washed over Katherine's face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know I'm asking a great deal. You should eat," Zachary said, nodding toward the breakfast tray. "You'll need your strength." As Katherine carefully ate her oatmeal, Zachary outlined what he knew of Blackwell's ranch. It was a substantial property, heavily guarded by men loyal to the cattle baron. Getting in wouldn't be easy, especially with Blackwell likely to return from Santa Fe any day. "I have some contacts in town who might know more about the situation at the ranch," he told her. "I'll ask around while you rest today." Katherine nodded, though he could see she was growing tired again, the laudanum and her injuries taking a toll. "I'm going to see to my horse and get my things," Zachary said, standing. "Will you be all right alone for an hour or so?" "I'll be fine," Katherine assured him, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety at his departure. Zachary hesitated, then removed his revolver from its holster and placed it on the bedside table. "Just in case," he said quietly. "Do you know how to use it?" Katherine's hand moved to the weapon, her fingers closing around the grip with surprising familiarity. "My father taught me. I'm a fair shot." Something like admiration flashed in Zachary's eyes. "I'll be back soon," he promised. "Keep the door locked." As Zachary made his way down the hotel stairs and out into the bright morning sunlight, his mind raced with the implications of what he'd agreed to do. Challenging Blackwell meant making an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory. If they failed, it could cost them both their lives. Yet he couldn't abandon Katherine Everly to her fate. There was something about her courage, her determination to find her sister despite the danger, that resonated with him. And if Elizabeth Blackwell was in trouble, if the rumors about Jonathan Blackwell's treatment of his wife were true, then someone needed to help her. With renewed purpose, Zachary strode toward the livery stable, already forming a plan in his mind. Katherine needed time to heal, and he needed information. The key to both was discretion. As long as Blackwell's men believed they'd successfully frightened Katherine out of town, they had a chance. But time was working against them. Sooner or later, someone would talk. And when Jonathan Blackwell returned from Santa Fe to discover that the woman asking questions about his wife was still in Chisum Ranch and being helped by a man who had once publicly humiliated him, there would be hell to pay. The livery stable was quiet when Zachary arrived. Just the stable boy mucking out stalls and his chestnut stallion, Maverick, contentedly munching hay. Maverick whickered a greeting as Zachary approached, bumping his velvety nose against his master's chest. "Hey, boy," Zachary murmured, stroking the horse's neck. "Looks like we're staying a while longer." He paid the stable boy to continue caring for Maverick, then collected his saddlebags and rifle. As he was leaving, a man stepped from the shadows of an empty stall, causing Zachary to instinctively reach for his revolver before remembering he'd left it with Katherine. "Been a while, Orwell," the man said, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. Zachary relaxed slightly, recognizing Thomas Morgan, a former Texas Ranger who'd settled in Chisum Ranch after the war. They'd ridden together briefly during a cattle drive years ago. "Morgan," he acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't know you were still in these parts." "Town marshal now," Morgan replied, tapping the tarnished star on his vest. "Such as it is. Not much authority when Blackwell owns most of the town council." Zachary studied the older man, weighing how much to reveal. Morgan had always struck him as honest, one of the few men in these parts who couldn't be bought. "Heard you found a woman in the street yesterday," Morgan continued when Zachary remained silent. "Took her to the hotel. Caused quite a stir." "Someone beat her badly and left her to die," Zachary said flatly. "Didn't seem right to just ride past." Morgan's expression darkened. "No, it didn't. That's why I'm here. Wanted to let you know Dixon and Harlow were bragging in the saloon last night. Said they'd taught a nosy Eastern bitch a lesson. Their words, not mine." Anger flared in Zachary's chest. "You arrest them," Morgan's laugh was bitter. "On what charge? Their word against." "Well, no one's. The woman hasn't filed a complaint. And even if she did, Blackwell would have them out of my jail before the ink dried. So there's no justice for her," the marshal sighed heavily. "Official justice? No, but I thought you should know who did it, and why." He paused, glancing around the stable to ensure they were alone. "That woman she was asking about, Elizabeth Blackwell." Zachary kept his expression neutral. "What about her?" "No one's seen her in nearly 3 months. Blackwell claims she's visiting family back east, but—" Morgan trailed off, his implication clear. "You think something happened to her?" "I think Blackwell is a mean drunk with a violent temper, and a wife who's less than half his age. I think the servants at his ranch have been replaced twice in the past year. And I think anyone asking questions about Elizabeth Blackwell tends to run into trouble." Morgan fixed Zachary with a meaningful look. "Like you might be doing." "Appreciate the concern," Zachary said carefully, "but I'm just passing through, heading to Colorado day after tomorrow." Morgan looked skeptical. "That's so. Then why are you gathering your gear from the livery instead of leaving it here till you're ready to ride out?" Zachary didn't answer directly. "The woman's name is Katherine Everly. She's Elizabeth's sister." Understanding dawned in Morgan's eyes. "Ah, that explains some things." He sighed again, rubbing his grizzled chin. "Look, Orwell, I can't officially help you, but off the record. Blackwell's due back from Santa Fe tomorrow or the next day. Whatever you and Miss Everly are planning, I'd advise you to do it quickly. Thanks for the warning." Morgan turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Blackwell's ranch foreman, Miguel Vasquez. He was devoted to Mrs. Blackwell, protected her when he could. He was dismissed 3 months ago, right around the time Elizabeth supposedly went east. Might be worth talking to him if you can find him. With that, the marshal departed, leaving Zachary with both valuable information and the uncomfortable knowledge that their situation was already the subject of town gossip. When Zachary returned to the hotel room, he found Katherine dozing, his revolver clutched in her right hand atop the quilt. The sight stirred something protective in him. He closed the door softly, but she woke immediately, the revolver rising before she recognized him. "You're back," she said, lowering the weapon with visible relief. "Told you I would be." He set down his gear and took the revolver gently from her hand, returning it to his holster. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle," she admitted, "but the laudanum helps." Zachary pulled the chair closer to her bed and told her about his encounter with Marshal Morgan. Katherine listened intently, her green eyes brightening with hope at the mention of Miguel Vasquez. "If he was loyal to Elizabeth, he might know what happened to her," she said eagerly. "We need to find him." Morgan didn't know where he went after Blackwell dismissed him, but in a territory this size, there are only so many places a Mexican ranch foreman could find work. "When can we start looking?" Zachary frowned. "Katherine, you can barely sit up." "You're not riding anywhere for at least a few days." Frustration flashed across her face. "But you heard the marshal. Blackwell returns tomorrow or the next day. We're running out of time." "I can start making inquiries today," Zachary conceded, "but you need to focus on healing." "We won't help your sister if you collapse from pushing yourself too hard." Katherine wanted to argue further, but a sharp pain in her ribs made her wince and lean back against the pillows. "You're right," she acknowledged reluctantly, "but please be careful." "If Blackwell's men realize you're asking about Miguel." "I know how to be discreet," Zachary assured her. "I'll be back before sundown. Keep the door locked, and don't let anyone in except Mrs. Holloway or Dr. Franklin." He hesitated, then removed a small derringer from his boot and placed it on the bedside table. "Just in case," he said quietly. Katherine's fingers closed around the small pistol. "Thank you for everything." Zachary nodded, oddly affected by her gratitude. As he turned to leave, she called his name. "Zachary, why are you really helping me? The truth this time." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. Why was he helping her? It wasn't simply about doing the right thing, though that was part of it. There was something about Katherine Everly, her courage, her determination. The way she refused to abandon her sister, despite the danger that called to him in a way no woman had in years. "Let's just say I understand what it's like to search for family," he said finally. "My brother went missing after Gettysburg. I spent 2 years looking for him before I learned he died in a prison camp. No one helped me then. I wish someone had." The raw honesty in his voice hung in the air between them. Katherine's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your brother," she said quietly. "It was a long time ago." Zachary straightened his shoulders. "Rest. I'll be back soon." As he closed the door behind him, Zachary acknowledged to himself that he hadn't told Katherine the whole truth. Yes, he understood her quest to find her sister. But there was also something about Katherine herself that drew him in, something that made him willing to risk confronting Jonathan Blackwell again. He just hoped that whatever he discovered today wouldn't make that confrontation inevitable. Chisum Ranch was a small town, but like most settlements in the territory, it had its share of saloons. Zachary visited 3 before he found anyone willing to talk about Miguel Vasquez. The bartender at the Rusty Spur, an establishment on the outskirts of town that catered primarily to ranch hands and drifters, finally provided useful information. "Vasquez," the bartender repeated, polishing a glass with a dubious-looking rag. "Yeah, I remember him. Used to come in here on his days off. Good customer, never caused trouble." "Know where he went after leaving Blackwell's employ?" Zachary asked casually, sliding a silver dollar across the scarred wooden bar. The bartender pocketed the coin. "Heard he headed south toward Las Cruces. Got family there, I think, but that was 3 months back." "He say why he left Blackwell's ranch?" The man's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You asking a lot of questions about a man who worked for Blackwell. That ain't usually healthy in these parts." Zachary pushed another coin across the bar. "Just looking for a good ranch foreman. Heard Vasquez was one of the best." The bartender seemed to accept this explanation. "Vasquez never said outright why he left. But the night before he disappeared, he came in here, drank half a bottle of whiskey. Kept mumbling something about not being able to protect her anymore and Blackwell going too far this time." Zachary's pulse quickened. He mentioned who she was. Didn't need to. Everyone knew he was sweet on Mrs. Blackwell in a respectful way, mind you. Looked out for her like an older brother might. Word is that's what got him fired. Blackwell was jealous. The bartender leaned closer. "Blackwell's a mean drunk and he's got a temper. Especially with his wife. Story goes Vasquez stepped between them one too many times." It confirmed what Marshal Morgan had implied. Blackwell was abusing his wife, and Miguel Vasquez had tried to protect her. "Any idea what happened to Mrs. Blackwell after Vasquez left?" Zachary pressed. The bartender shrugged. "Official story is she went back east to visit family. Blackwell threw a big going-away dinner for her at the ranch. But there's those who say no one actually saw her leave. Make of that what you will." Zachary thanked the man and left, his mind working through the implications. If Elizabeth Blackwell never actually left for the East, what had happened to her? And if Miguel Vasquez knew the truth, would he be willing to talk about it? The afternoon was waning when Zachary returned to the hotel. He'd spent hours asking discreet questions around town, piecing together information about Miguel Vasquez and the Blackwell Ranch. What he'd learned painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Katherine was sitting up in bed when he entered, her blonde hair neatly braided and her face freshly washed. She looked markedly better than she had that morning, the swelling around her eyes having receded somewhat. Mrs. Holloway had apparently found her a clean nightgown and wrapper. "You look improved," Zachary observed, setting down his hat. "Mrs. Holloway has been very kind," Katherine replied. "She helped me wash and change. I feel somewhat human again." Her eager expression turned serious as she noted Zachary's grim countenance. "What did you learn?" Zachary sat heavily in the chair beside her bed. "Nothing good, I'm afraid." He recounted what he'd discovered: the rumors of Blackwell's abuse, Miguel Vasquez's protectiveness toward Elizabeth, and the suspicious circumstances of her supposed departure for the East. Katherine listened with growing horror, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "You think he killed her?" she whispered when he'd finished. "I don't know," Zachary answered honestly, "but I think Miguel Vasquez might." According to the bartender at the Rusty Spur, he headed to Las Cruces after leaving Blackwell's employ. That's about 2 days' ride from here. Katherine's eyes flashed with determination. "Then that's where we need to go. Katherine, you're in no condition to travel." "I'll manage," she insisted. "We can take it slowly, but we need to find Miguel before Blackwell returns and realizes I'm still in town." She reached for his hand impulsively. "Please, Zachary, if Elizabeth is alive, she may need help urgently, and if she's—" Her voice faltered. "If she's not, I need to know what happened to her." Zachary looked down at her small hand covering his, feeling the tremor in her fingers despite her brave words. She was still weak, still in pain, but her eyes held a steel that told him she would attempt the journey with or without him. "We'll leave tomorrow at dawn," he conceded. "But we'll need to take a wagon. You can't ride horseback with those ribs." Relief washed over Catherine's face. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This journey won't be easy, and we have no guarantee Vasquez is still in Las Cruces or that he'll talk to us if we find him." "He'll talk to me," Catherine said with quiet conviction. "I'm Elizabeth's sister. If he cared for her as much as you say, he'll want to help." Zachary nodded, hoping she was right. "I'll make arrangements for a wagon and supplies. We'll need to leave town discreetly if Blackwell's men discover our plans." "I understand." As Zachary rose to depart again, Catherine caught his wrist. "Zachary, I know I've asked too much of you already, but I need you to know how grateful I am. When those men left me in the street, I thought I was going to die without ever learning what happened to Elizabeth. You've given me hope." The emotion in her voice stirred something deep in Zachary's chest. He gently covered her hand with his own. "Get some rest, Catherine. Tomorrow will be a long day." Outside the hotel room, Zachary leaned against the wall for a moment, collecting his thoughts. He was committing himself to a dangerous course, one that could well lead to a confrontation with Jonathan Blackwell, a man who wouldn't hesitate to kill to protect his secrets. And for what? A woman he'd known barely a day. Yet as he thought of Catherine's determination, her unwavering loyalty to her sister, he knew he couldn't turn back now. Whatever happened, he would see this through to the end. Dr. Franklin arrived that evening to check on Catherine once more. He frowned when Zachary mentioned their plan to depart for Las Cruces the following morning. "Miss Everly is in no condition to travel," the doctor protested. "Those ribs need rest, and I'm still concerned about her head injury." "We don't have a choice, Doc," Zachary replied quietly. "Blackwell returns tomorrow or the next day, if Catherine is still in town when he arrives." Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes. "I see. In that case, I'll give you additional laudanum for the journey. Use it sparingly, just enough to take the edge off her pain." When Dr. Franklin departed, Mrs. Holloway appeared with a tray of dinner and a bundle of clothing. "For Miss Everly," she explained, setting the bundle on the foot of the bed. "My daughter's things. They should fit well enough, and some food for your journey tomorrow." Catherine looked up in surprise. "You know we're leaving." Mrs. Holloway's kind face creased with concern. "Word travels fast in a small town, my dear, and I've been running this hotel long enough to know when someone needs to make a hasty departure. Just promise me you'll be careful, both of you." "We will," Zachary assured her. "And thank you for everything." After Mrs. Holloway left, Catherine turned to Zachary with alarm. "If she knows we're leaving, others might too." "It's a risk," he acknowledged, "but we'll be gone before dawn, and Mrs. Holloway won't betray us." They ate their dinner in companionable silence, each lost in thought about the journey ahead. As darkness fell, Zachary prepared to leave for the night. "I'll sleep in the chair," Catherine offered. "You take the bed. You need rest more than I do if you're driving the wagon tomorrow." Zachary shook his head. "I'll be fine in the chair. Been sleeping in worse places for years." Catherine looked as if she wanted to argue but was too exhausted to pursue the matter. She sank back against the pillows, her eyelids heavy. "Zachary," she murmured as sleep began to claim her, "I'm glad it was you who found me in that street." Something warm unfurled in Zachary's chest at her words. "So am I," he said softly, but Catherine was already asleep. Zachary spent a restless night in the chair, his mind churning with plans and contingencies for their journey. When the first gray light of dawn filtered through the window, he was already awake, checking his revolver and gathering their meager supplies. Catherine stirred as he moved about the room. "Is it time?" she asked, her voice husky with sleep. "Almost. Can you dress yourself or do you need help?" A faint blush colored her cheeks. "I can manage if you'll just turn your back." Zachary obligingly faced the window while Katherine struggled into the clothes. Mrs. Holloway had provided a simple calico dress and sturdy boots. He could hear her soft gasps of pain as the movement pulled at her injured ribs, but she didn't complain. "Ready," she finally announced. When Zachary turned, he was struck by the transformation. Despite her injuries, Katherine looked lovely in the simple dress, her honey blonde hair braided neatly over one shoulder. She stood shakily beside the bed, one arm wrapped protectively around her torso. "You're sure about this?" Zachary asked one last time. "It's not too late to change your mind." Katherine's green eyes met his, unwavering. "I'm sure." With a nod, Zachary gathered their things and helped Katherine down the back stairs of the hotel. A small wagon with a canvas cover waited in the alley, hitched to a sturdy bay mare. Maverick was tied to the back, saddled and ready. "Mrs. Holloway arranged the wagon," Zachary explained as he helped Katherine onto the wooden seat. "Said we could return it to her brother in Las Cruces." The eastern sky was just beginning to blush pink as they set out, taking the back roads to avoid the main street of Chisum Ranch. Katherine sat rigidly beside Zachary, clearly in pain but determined not to show it. "It's a 2-day journey to Las Cruces, maybe 3 at the pace we'll need to take," Zachary told her as the town receded behind them. "The trail's rough in places. Tell me if you need to stop." Katherine nodded, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. "You really think we'll find Miguel Vasquez? And that he'll tell us what happened to Elizabeth?" "I hope so," Zachary replied honestly. "For both your sakes." As the sun rose fully over the New Mexico landscape, bathing the desert in golden light, Zachary couldn't help but glance at the woman beside him. Katherine Everly had come west alone to find her sister, had been beaten nearly to death for her trouble, and was now embarking on an arduous journey while still badly injured. Her courage was remarkable. And if Miguel Vasquez confirmed their worst fears that Elizabeth Blackwell was dead at her husband's hands, what then? Would Katherine be satisfied to return east with the truth? Or would she demand justice for her sister? Zachary suspected he already knew the answer. And if Katherine chose to pursue justice against Jonathan Blackwell, he knew he would stand with her, whatever the cost. The sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky as the wagon rolled south, leaving Chisum Ranch and its dangers behind. For now, at least, they were safe. But Zachary knew better than most that, in the New Mexico territory, safety was always temporary.